during the course of the season. Okay, so Rule 1 clarifications. We had a number of questions that came in. Norm may have sent out emails that address some of these, but I wanted to include them here. There was a question regarding a test question on interference. I'll show that in the next chart. There was a question regarding whether or not we should be actively looking for the chest protector marking, and the answer is yes, we should. We should also verify with the coach that the equipment is legal and proper, and hopefully we get that verification from the coach that the chest protectors that they are wearing or other devices that are underneath the chest protector which may not have the NOCSAE symbol, all of their players are properly and legally equipped. There was a question regarding the rule summary. I reposted that out onto the MAC website, so that is now available yet again for anyone who wants to take that rule summary with them to their games and incorporate that in their pregame. And then there was a question regarding the DH rule and how it impacts the courtesy runner, so I have a chart on that. So here's that question that we discussed the first time at our last webinar. When we have a runner on third and there's a pop-up around the third base and the third baseman is accidentally prevented from catching it by the runner, the question gives you 4 options. And to be honest with you, neither of those options really address the correct answer. I may be missing something, but the real answer that I would like is the runner at third is going to be out, but in B, it says, and the batter is out, which is not true. So I give you 2 examples from the casebook and last year's exam where we have different scenarios. In the scenario on your left, we have the interference by the runner. Our runner is going to be declared out, but the batter is going to remain at bat. And in the example on the right, where we have the coach interfere, now the batter is going to be declared out. So we really don't have, unless I'm missing something, we really don't have the right answer in this particular rule question. I answered it B as being closest, but B is really not correct as well. So I guess we'll wait and see in March when the answers come out. So I just wanted to pass that on to all of you. We also had a question regarding clarification on the new DH rule, and so I'm just going to go through this real quick. Again, we have the traditional use where we have a 10-man lineup, and the DH can bat for any one of the 10 players listed in the lineup. The 2020 rule change is we now allow the DH to be a starting defensive player. So for those of us who do some collegiate baseball, we're a little bit familiar with that. So here are 2 examples where we have a DH that is also the pitcher. We call that a pitcher DH. But you can also have a DH for a defensive position. If you want to call that a DP, defensive position DH, you can. So those are the 2 types of lineups that we're going to see come the 2020 season. And there's no change with the DH. The team will forfeit the use of the DH if it is not listed in the starting lineup. So if they want a DH, it has to be identified. If it's not identified, then they don't get to use the DH at all in that game. So here's our 9-man lineup that would be new for this year. And I went through a number of different lineup changes, how they would look. So if it's a straight change where they take the pitcher DH or the defensive position DH and they just make a straight substitution, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see sub 1 come in for the pitcher DH in this example. We're going to keep David as the DH, but we're going to substitute a new F1. So now we're growing the lineup from 9 to 10, where we now have the DH as a standalone position, and we now have the substitute, whether it's for an F1 or defensive player, in the lineup. They can do just the reverse. They can keep David as the pitcher, and then bring in a DH as the substitute. So again, we're going from 9 to 10. Multiple substitutions, if for some reason they substitute both the DH, if it's a 10-man lineup and they substitute both the DH and the position player for which the DH is DHing for, they have to inform us as the umpires right then and there so that we can properly put the substitutes in the right position in the lineup, whether as a defensive position down at the bottom or as a individual who's batting in the batting order. And we're still awaiting addressing language returning from the 10-man lineup back to 9. I believe it is legal, but for now we'll save that for later.
Greg,
here's where we put the rules. Go ahead, Norm.
Let me add one thing. If the lineup includes a pitcher DH or a catcher DH, and they bat and get on base, the first clarification I've seen indicates that the person on base is the DH, not the pitcher or the catcher. So they cannot courtesy run for a pitcher DH or a catcher DH. The interpretation is that even though the pitcher is the defensive position, his offensive position is DH. So if he gets on base, you cannot courtesy run for a DH. You can only courtesy run for a pitcher or catcher who are not being DH'd for. And hopefully we'll get
Correct.
clarification from that at the state rules clinic.
I think I found that today, and that may be a last-minute chart that I added into the package. That may be coming up in 2 or 3 charts. So let's hold off on that for a second. So there was a question regarding the rule summary that we put out. It's, again, reposted out onto our website under the community section. And there you see I made the post a few days ago. So it should be available for everyone to download and hopefully, again, take to your game. So this is what Norm was talking about regarding the pitcher DH or a catcher DH. Even though it may not be specifically addressed in the rule book or the case book, it is included in the clinic charts that hopefully we will see in the near term online. Again, we take the VHSL clinic online this year. And this is the chart that you're going to see. And as Norm indicated, so whenever a pitcher or a catcher is the DH and that pitcher DH or catcher DH is on base, they cannot provide a courtesy runner for that type of player. And as Norm indicated, if they are a pitcher or a catcher, but not the DH, and they are on base, then they can be courtesy run. Other elements of the courtesy runner rule are unchanged. So here's that example of the lineups where we have a straight lineup change. Can you courtesy run for a pitcher DH or a catcher DH? No. Can you courtesy run if they are not? Actually, this is wrong. As we indicated, I'll correct this for the next webinar. So if you are a catcher only or a pitcher only, then you can DH. If you are a DH for the pitcher, catcher, DH for the catcher. Yeah, this is right. Okay, we're now getting into the interference section of our presentation. You are going to see videos. We try and use the videos to enhance the learning opportunities. Just as a reminder, the observed mechanics in the videos may not be the same as the mechanics that we do at the high school level in 2-man. So please ignore the mechanics. We're going to emphasize, highlight those things that we want you to take away from the videos. And that's also true for the audio component of the video themselves. You may hear announcers, ignore the announcers. They may or may not have the right commentary that goes with what we're seeing. So So hopefully you'll pick up on the messages that we want to try and extract from the videos. So we went through that. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into interference. But before I do that, I'll stop and ask if Norm or Tim have any questions that have come in at this point in time.
None.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay,
This
Okay, the
year
first part.
There is one.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Is the Noxie chest protector required for rec ball? It is if you're playing Federation rules, which is Northern Virginia Travel League. Any other league that plays Federation rules, then it's required.
It has not been adopted by Babe Ruth, Cal Ripken, or Little League as of January 1st, 2020.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first part is we're just going to go over some highlights of the interference rule. What is it? It's an act by the team at bat where they interfere, impede, and hinder, all those things. It can be caused by a batter. It could be caused by a runner. It could be caused by a coach, anyone who's associated with the offense. Unfortunately, from time to time, we may get involved in a play, so part of the rule book addresses umpire interference. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Spectators, for the most part, at the high school level, all of our fields are enclosed. We really shouldn't have to worry too much about spectator interference. There is what everyone calls catcher's interference, which is really obstruction, catcher's obstruction. That's on the defense, not the offense. So we've broken it down. So review 2 tonight, we'll look at batter interference, and then review 3, we'll look at the batter runner and the runner. And then review 4, we'll cover everything else. Interference can occur in different places with different participants, clearly at the plate with the batter, on the bases with the batter runner prior to going to first base. He completed his time at bat, now he becomes a batter runner. Or with a runner between the bases, we experience runner's interference. And then again, there are other types of interference as well, whether if it's offense, someone related with the team, the coach, umpire, or spectator. So catcher's interference, which is really obstruction, occurs at the plate. Batter interference also occurs at the plate area. The batter runner, those interfering plays that occur from the time in which the batter runner exits the plate area and up to first base. We can have runner interference amongst the bases. Again, umpire interference in either our A, B, or C positions or behind the plate. Coaches may inadvertently interfere, so we need to be prepared to rule on that. And then spectator interference, again, I don't think we'll see that, at least not for the scholastic ball, because most of the fields are enclosed. When you get into rec ball, then the fields become a little bit more open, and you might have a problem there, or possibly at some of the private schools. Interference is situation dependent. Sometimes it's going to be an immediate dead ball, and as an example, an illegal slide. And we'll cover illegal slides in the next review. Sometimes it's going to be a delayed dead ball, and we'll talk about that tonight, particularly for batter interference. Again, catcher interference, we'll cover that in a future review. Interference does not necessarily require contact. If contact occurs, you could have interference, but the interference could also alter the play, and in particular for tonight, the catcher's ability to make a play. So the point here is contact is not required if you believe the interference had altered the play. There are times when you can have contact that is neither interference or obstruction. An example of that is a collision at first base between the batter runner and the first baseman. We'll cover that in the next review. The penalty will vary for batter's interference or the runner is out for batter interference on a squeeze play. For batter interference, the runner is out for interference with possibly 2 outs. The violator is always going to be declared out, or possibly under certain plays, the runner closest to home is going to be declared out, and we'll cover that in the next review under runner interference. And generally, usually, normally, most of the time, we're going to return runners on an interference play. But there are some plays where there is interference, like catcher's interference, where you can actually have the coach choose an option to either take the play or the penalty. And again, we'll cover that in a future rule under catcher's interference. So that's a general overview of what interference is and where it can occur and the types of interferences that you might see. So let me go ahead and stop at this point again and see if there are any questions or comments from Tim, Norm.
No
Don't see
questions.
any.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now let's go ahead and turn our attention to batter's interference. So what is it? It's when the batter interferes with the catcher's ability to throw or to field, and that can occur in a number of different ways. In our pick play, you see the batter more than likely swung. His momentum carries him into the throwing lane, over the plate, and possibly into the throwing lane of the catcher who's trying to retire possibly a stealing runner. It could also be backswing interference, follow-through interference. Those are other different types of interferences that are caused by the batter. When the pitcher has not engaged on the pitcher's rubber and he throws it to the plate, like for instance in a squeeze play, and the batter attempts to hit the throw, that's not a pitch, it's a throw, that's interference. Or he's just generally making any other types of movements that hinders the action around home plate, or the catcher attempts to play on a runner on any one of the bases. A thrown bat, the only time that becomes interference is if it's thrown to the direction of a fielder who has the opportunity to field the batted ball. If the bat goes to another fielder who is not fielding the ball, then we have nothing. And again, generally, usually, normally, it's going to be a delayed dead ball. And it's a delayed dead ball because we want to afford the defense the opportunity for a put out. The only time for batter interference where it's an immediate dead ball is when the batter swings at a thrown ball, not a pitch from the pitcher's plate. The penalty associated for batter interference, when there are 2 outs, the batter is going to be declared out. But there are times when there are not 2 outs, the batter will generally be out. But then there's also a possibility that the runner closest to home on a squeeze play would be called out and the batter would remain at bat. And I believe I have a case play that will go through that later on in the presentation. So this is what it looks like. This is a pretty clear, pretty obvious example of batter interference. In this still picture, we have a runner on first. He's stealing second. Batter swings. Catcher comes up. He's going to throw down to second base to try and put out the runner on first, advancing to second. So if we see something like this, this should be fairly clear and easy for us to call. So before we get into our first series of video examples of batter interference, I want to let everyone know that these videos have been posted onto our website. So as you can see here, the Entry 2020 NBBUA Webinar 2 video links. If you go to that under the community section, you will see all of the videos that we're going to be presenting tonight. if you want to go back and review these videos. So for batter interference, again, catching the catcher's, interfering with the catcher's throwing or fielding, leaning over the plate, making any other movements. The next chart's going to show 4 examples of batter interference. 2 are going to be examples of the catcher throwing, trying to put out a runner on base. There are 2 examples of where the batter is going to interfere with the catcher's ability to field around home plate. And again, contact is not required. And I want you to take note in the videos that we're going to see the strong and definitive plate mechanic that our plate umpire will demonstrate when he sees and calls the interference play. So with that, let's go ahead and look at these 4 videos, and then we'll come back and pick up where we left off. I'm going to play all 4.
First time up, Ben Zobrist struck out and then interfered. Let's listen in to first base coach Rusty Kuntz.
We now call the runner on whom the play is being made on out. In this case, R1 is now out going to second base. So ultimately we have a double play here. The batter swings and misses, that's strike 3, but he interferes. Now the throw goes down to second base.
The Reds end up with a victory here as finally and over the top of the plate, Mesoraco obstructed and Morales points at him.
Fuller for giving up the attempt.
Interference hardly contain himself right now. Polar is right there intruding on Cervelli.
PowerPoint. So again, either throwing or fielding, the catcher has the opportunity to field a throw to second or to third, wherever the steal is taking place, or to field a ball around the plate, and the batter is required to not interfere. There are times when we have batter interference where it may not be obvious, it may only be slight. These are going to be a little bit harder to pick up. So here's an example of one that's very slight. As you can see, our batter is in the batter's box, and even though he's in the batter's box, there is still an opportunity for the batter to interfere with the catcher's ability, in this particular case, to put out a runner advancing to a base. Here's a profile view. Our batter is still in the box. Catcher comes up. He's going to make a throw down to a base. But as you can see, the interference is not leaning over the plate. The interference is the result of the hands making contact with the catcher. Is it slight? Yes. Is it obvious? No. But this is a possibility where we have interference by the batter interfering with the catcher's ability to make a play on a runner who's advancing to a base. Now the question becomes, does a throwing lane exist? And if it does, is there interference? So in our image here, we have a batter who has swung. Is he out of the box? Yes, he is. Is he kind of over the plate? He is. But does the catcher have a throwing lane? And if he does have a throwing lane, then you may not have interference. So this is going to be a judgment call by the plate umpire. My rule of thumb is I am conservative. If I think there was interference, even though there was a throwing lane, I'm going to call the interference. But there are times when there's no contact. The catcher does have a unobstructed throwing lane to make a throw. So this is a little bit harder of a call. So use your best judgment and try and observe all the key components of the play and then make your call. So our next 2 videos, where is the example where we have the batter has slight interference on the catcher, and the second video clip is going to be batter interference with an example of the throwing lane. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
On that, Severino, when he came up to make the throw, made the slightest bit of contact with the knob of Dietrich's bat, maybe Dietrich's hand, and they've called Ozuna out, inning over.
So hopefully you saw in both video examples the slight interference on the first video, and in the second one, even though the batter may have stepped over home plate and there was enough time for a throwing lane to be created, in that example, I would probably call interference because you saw the potential for the catcher to double clutch, waiting for the batter to get out of the way, and by the time he threw, there was a throwing lane. But don't be deceived, because by then the damage was done and he had to double clutch. So once we see batter interference, what do we do next? It's going to be a delayed dead ball because we're going to afford the defense the opportunity to make a play. If the runner is safe, we're going to call time. The ball's going to become dead. We're going to declare the batter out, and we're going to put the runner back to the base he originated from. If the runner is called out, we've given the defense the opportunity for a put out. He got the runner out. We're going to keep the ball live, and the batter is now going to remain at bat because the defense got the out. If the batter strikes out for strike three, he is now out. He interferes. We're now also going to get the runner out. So now you're going to get 2 outs when the batter strikes out. The batter for the strikeout and the runner for the interference. There are some special plays and some unique plays about batter interference, particularly a squeeze play. And when we have multiple runners, that adds an additional level of challenge. So we have 2 case plays, so we're going to talk about that. Our first case play, we have a runner on first and third. The runner on first is going to steal, attempted steal to second. On the attempted steal to second, R3 is going to come home and score. So that's what we have. And the runner on second is going to be declared out. Well, now that we have the out at second, the runner from third who comes in and scores, that run's going to count. And the reason why it's going to count is because we gave the defense the opportunity for a put out. They chose to put out R1 at second. They were successful. So now we're going to allow the runner on third to score. And in this scenario, there was only 1 out, so the runner on second, R1 out at second, was just the second out. In our second example, we have runners on first and second. We have a double steal. B4 swings and misses at the pitch and interferes with F2's attempt to throw either R1 or R2. Sorry about that. So which runner in our second scenario is going to be declared out? Well, if we don't know who F2 is going to have made a play on, then by rule, we're going to call out the runner nearest to home plate, which would be R2. So multiple runners. If you don't know, we take the lead runner coming home. On a squeeze play, this is another special case for interference. If a runner is out when he attempts to advance home base and batter interferes with a play at home base with less than 2 outs, we're going to declare the runner out. If there are 2 outs, we're going to declare the batter out. So it's important for us to always it's always important for us to know the number of outs, because the number of outs may have an effect on a play that you're going to have to umpire. And in this particular play, on a squeeze play, with less than 2 outs, we're declaring the runner out. With 2 outs, we'll declare the batter out. So that's one type of batter interference, with the batter leaning over the plate. There's another type of batter interference that's either through the backswing or the follow through. So let's go ahead and go through that. Actually, before I do that, let me stop and ask Tim and Norm if there are any comments or questions up to this point in time.
Yeah, there's about 3 questions, and I think subsequent slides have answered them all. One was, how do you determine the throwing lane? And from your slides, basically, the inside edge of the batter's box, the batter should not be leaving that toward the plate in any circumstance. But as Greg explained, in an attempt to, when the catcher makes an attempt to throw a ball, you shouldn't be in his way. Next question was, you just answered, what do you do about the interference on a strike 3 call? Well, almost anytime you call interference, when the play ends, you're going to get an out because of that interference. And in doing so, the batter's already out, so you have to get the other out, which is the runner closest to home plate. And there was a question about acknowledging the interference by verbally calling that's interference. And you always wait for the play to conclude, because if the stealing runner, even though there's interference, if that runner's thrown out, that out stands, the interference is ignored. So you have to wait till the play concludes in any case to make sure you apply the penalty properly. And that's all the questions.
Thank you, Norm. Okay, so now let's go ahead and shift to 2 other types of interferences that are the result of the batter at the home plate area, backswing and follow through. So what backswing interference is, this is when the batter is loosening up, warming up, and he's bringing the bat back around. It's not an attempt to pitch the ball, because the ball may not have been pitched yet. It's just him loosening up, and he makes contact with the catcher. The other type of backswing interference occurs a little bit later, where we now have the starting motion of the pitcher, okay, and for whatever reason, the batter is still warming up. He shouldn't be, but if he does, both of these are examples of backswing interference. You should get prior to the pitch rather than after the start of the pitching motion, but in both cases, it really doesn't matter. It's backswing interference. It's an immediate dead ball, and we're going to start anew. We're not going to call a balk on the pitcher. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to kill the play and start anew. So that's backswing interference. Follow-through interference is there's an actual swing by the batter. And there are 2 types of follow-through interference. One is where there is no contact with the pitch. He misses. On the miss, he brings the bat around and hits the catcher. That's follow-through interference. That's potentially going to be a delayed dead ball situation. The other type of follow-through interference is if the batter actually makes contact with the pitch ball and he puts the ball in play, but his follow-through hits the catcher. Again, that will be a delayed dead ball situation. So here are 3 videos, clips that are going to give you some good examples of follow-through interference by the batter.
The guy that did it, because he's a catcher and knows exactly what that feels like. Boom. It was pretty good impact. Almost knocked him down.
There's the 1-0. Jackson's on the move. A little hit and run action. A swing and a miss. Low throw. And Coward can't dig it out. The ball gets away. Jackson will end up at third. I think that's what they're going to do. He's got to go back to first base.
And you see Adam Hamari looking right down as he leaves that bat as far as trying to get that follow-through on the throws. You could see it definitely had an impact on the follow-through from Martin Maldonado.
Runner goes now. The pitch is swing and a miss. And on the backswing, that caught Bobby Wilson. And they're going to call the runner out. So Ortiz.
Okay, so hopefully you got a good look at what follow-through interference looks like. So now that follow-through interference takes place, what happens next? Okay, so if he makes contact with the pitch ball and puts the ball in the play and interferes with the catcher, if it's a play involving the catcher, let's just say a dribble around the front of the base, or a play that is not involving the catcher, he puts the ball in play and it goes to the shortstop. If it involves the catcher, it's going to be a delayed dead ball because we're going to give the catcher the opportunity to make a put out. If it's a play not involving the catcher and there's follow-through interference, we're going to play on because there's no need to protect the catcher. He is not involved in the play. So now we have follow-through interference with the pitch, missed, and the bat comes around and hits the catcher. So now there are a number of different possibilities here. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So he swung at the pitch and he missed contact with the catcher. So now we have a number of different situations where we have the runner stealing. We may have a runner who is not stealing. We may have follow-through interference on a drop third strike. We may have followed interference on a pass ball. Or we may have follow-through interference where we make contact with, unfortunately, the umpire. If a runner is stealing, then we're going to have a delayed dead ball because we're going to give the catcher the opportunity for a put out. If it's a squeeze play, we're also going to do the same where it's a delayed dead ball and we're going to give the catcher the opportunity for a put out. If no runners on base are stealing, they stay put, and we have follow-through interference, then we have nothing because the catcher is not involved in any play because there is no play. There's no runner attempting to steal. If we have a drop third strike or a pass ball, again, if it's in the catcher's area, we're going to give that catcher the opportunity to make a play. So it's going to be a delayed dead ball. And if unfortunately it hits us, we're going to play on. Again, the intent of follow-through interference is to protect the defense and give them an opportunity for a put out. It's a delayed dead ball. If the runner is safe, we're going to call time. The batter is going to be declared out, and the runners are going to return. If on the follow-through, the catcher gets a put out where the runner is out, then we're going to ignore the interference, and the ball is going to remain live. Now, for those of you, this is just a little tidbit of information. For the drop third strike and the pass ball, the reason why that's highlighted differently is as we in our umpiring career progress hopefully upward and maybe into some collegiate ball, when we get to different levels, this particular rule will have a different change to it. So, but for the high school level, this is what we do for follow-through interference. I thought about showing this. It's out on the website. I'm just going to go ahead and pass through it to save some time. If you happen to have any type of potential for interference by the batter, and there is no interference by the batter, and the catcher makes an attempt to put out, one of the mechanics that I do is you can come up and say, that's nothing. It demonstrates to both dugouts that you saw the entirety of the play, and there wasn't anything for them to argue about or come out of the dugout. And that's really no different than if you were a base umpire, ball's hit to a fielder, the runner is close enough to the fielder where there might be a hit ball, but there isn't. The fielder fields the ball. As a base umpire, we generally, usually, normally, most of the time, will signal that's nothing. So you can do that behind the plate as well. Demonstrate that you're focused on the play, and hopefully we keep the coach in the dugout, and more importantly, keep the game progressing. On a squeeze play, we talked about this, so we now have some video examples as to what a interference might look on a squeeze play. The runner is going to be declared out if we determine that the batter had interfered with the catcher's opportunity for a put out. Let's go ahead and take a look at these two examples.
And then you get a situation where you try to rush that throw back off balance because of where it was, and not much of a throwing lane in that spot. Paul Molitor just gets thrown out of the game.
Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to take a look and see what that looks like. In the first one, again, these are judgment calls. Did you feel that the batter in his secondary movements, knowing that the runner was coming home, do you think that he may have interfered with the catcher's ability to make a play on the runner? And in the second, we have a squeeze play, but then it turned into a potential play back at third, and then a play back at home. And whether or not there was any type of interference on the batter's part. And as you can see in the video, our plate umpire determined that there was no interference on that play by the batter. Real quick, failing to vacate, this just states that when a batter has the opportunity, particularly like on a pass ball, he's required to vacate the batter's box so that he does not interfere with any play at the plate. That's our rule and our penalty. We probably won't see this very much, but for completeness purposes, we included it in the presentation. Pole bat, as we mentioned earlier, if it's thrown and it interferes with the fielder who's fielding the ball, then we have interference. If it's thrown and it interferes, if it's thrown and at another fielder who's not fielding the ball, then we have nothing. Here's a case play, slow roller. The whole bat slips, interferes with that 5. The bat breaks and also interferes with that 5. If it's a whole bat, we have interference. If it's a broken back, we have nothing. So that's the takeaway. Whole bat interference, broken bat, nothing. Okay, it's 7:20. If I had time, I was going to cover this. So I think I'm going to try and do this in 2 minutes so that we can still meet our 7:30 timeline. So let's talk quickly about the batter's box. When is the batter's foot considered to be outside of the batter's box? It's considered to be out of the batter's box when no part of either foot is touching the ground outside the boundary lines forming the batter's box. So it is permissible for the feet, more likely the lead foot, to be touching the boundary line because the boundary line of a batter's box is part of the box. So even if 99, 98, 97% of the foot is outside the box on the ground, if any part of that foot is touching the line, he is still considered to be in the box. He has to be touching the ground completely outside of the boundary lines to be out. And if his foot is in the air outside of the batter's box, because it is not touching the ground, the foot is still considered to be in the batter's box. So here's some examples. In our first example, upper left, we have contact with the ball. The batter's front foot is on the batter's box line. That's going to just be a foul ball in the box. Our second example, where he hits the ball, it hits the batter with the foot in the air outside of the batter's box. It's still going to be a foul ball. Our third example, it hits the ball, bounces with the batter's foot. The foot is completely out of the batter's box. Now the batter's going to, it says foul ball, but now the batter's going to be declared out because his foot is completely on the ground, out of the box. There are two scenarios. Upper right is hits the ball foul, he's out. Hits the ball fair, he's out, because in both those scenarios, his foot is completely on the ground outside of the batter's box. I'll have to change the color in the upper right. Here's a video that's posted on the website. I don't include it here. So if you go to the website, you'll see that this batter is completely outside the batter's box. His foot is on the ground when he makes contact with the pitched ball. And here's our rule reference. Completely outside the lines of the batter's box. That's when he puts himself in jeopardy. And here's an example of a case play. Okay, so that's it for batter's interference, which includes batter interference at the plate. It includes batter interference on a backswing. It includes batter interference on the follow-through and what happens when we have follow-through interference and the various types of plays that you might see regarding a pass ball and the like. So hopefully you have a fairly good idea as to how to manage batter interference plays when you go to your game. Our next webinar, which is going to be on the 3rd, is going to cover interference, or excuse me, on the 26th. Again, that's going to be Sunday. Now we're going to shift away from the batter to the batter runner. That's the batter whose time at bat has ended, and now he becomes a batter runner, and what the interference possibilities may exist for that batter runner, particularly to first base, and then runner interference. And that's also going to include legal and illegal slides. So we have a number of charts that talk about that as well. And then again, as another reminder, we're probably going to delete the March 2nd. That's going to be an in-person association meeting. So we'll just skip on down when the time comes to March 9th. And again, next Sunday is our next webinar, not Monday night. Again, the 26th. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions and closing remarks for Tim and Norm. And thank you, and I'll see you guys this coming Sunday.
Okay, there are a number of questions that I think most of the subsequent slides provided answers for, but I'll go through these very quickly. One question was, what about an on-deck batter interfering with a play at the plate? The principle of the interference is that if the offense interferes, you're going to get an out. So if the on-deck hitter has interfered, obviously you can't call him out, but you're going to get someone out. You're going to get the person closest to home plate is going to be out. The next question was, what about, nope, that's the same question. The next question was, does the catcher need to attempt a throw for interference to be called? Not if you think the interference prevented him from being able to make a throw. So if the batter has entered a space that he's not supposed to be in, the throwing lane for the catcher, however you determine that lane to be, if the batter has interfered with his attempt to throw, doesn't have to throw. If he interferes with the attempt to throw and he doesn't make a throw, that batter is going to be out. And there was a question about batter interference on strike 3. Obviously, he's out. But the runner on first had a great jump, and had great proximity to second before the throw was made. Doesn't matter. Once that interference occurs, if the throw does not retire the runner, which I think is implied in this question, the batter's already out. He interfered. He swung and struck out prior to interfering. So he's already out when he interfered. Now you have to get someone else out. So that runner that even though he successfully stole second, he's the one you get out. And let's see if there's
Norm.
I'm looking. Oh, so there's next question. At a steal of home, what does the batter need to do if he takes the pitch? If possible, he needs to vacate the area, which was covered on one of the slides. Sometimes that steal home happens real quickly. If he doesn't vacate, he might get run over by the batter or by the runner. So as long as he doesn't make an overt move to interfere with the catcher's fielding the ball or attempting a tag, you have nothing. But if he has the slightest instant to vacate the area, he needs to do so. And that's the last question.
So Norm, if I may add a comment.
Please.
So on that particular play, obviously the batter cannot be invisible. That he's allowed to occupy his space in his batter's box. But as Norm said, if you judge that any movement he makes, intentional, unintentional, accidental, and you feel that that movement may have caused the catcher to do something abnormal or interfere with the catcher's ability to make a play on that runner, then you have interference. So it is permissible. It's preferable for them to vacate, particularly when there's a runner on second and he's rounding third, he's coming home. For whatever reason, the batter's still there. You tell the batter to get the heck out of the way. But if it's a squeeze play at third, there's the opportunity to vacate would be slim to none. If he can, great. But the batter can freeze so long as he does not interfere, and that's a judgment call that you're going to have to make.
Right. There are a few other questions that we need to make sure that we see each slide and subsequent slides, because a lot of times your questions are answered through the subsequent slides. But there was a question about, I thought whole bat interference is only when it's intentionally thrown to interfere. No, interference doesn't have to be an intentional act. If the bat slips out of the guy's hands, but it interferes with the fielder trying to make a play, then he has interfered. So you would have an out.
The batter is always responsible for his bat.
Right. Another question, can the foot start 97% out of the box? As long as your foot is touching the box, the lines of the box, and not touching the plate, you're considered in the box.
Norm, I think the only exception there that's important to point out is that if the player's foot is touching the plate,
right,
that's an exception.
That's right. That's what I said, as long as it's not touching the plate.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's a big foot.
I think that's all the questions.
Okay, Tim, do you have any comments before we sign off?
Yeah, Greg, thanks for the presentation. Thanks, everybody, for attending. I'd like to remind everybody to, if you haven't done so already, contact Yang Z and get a slot for cage training. We all need it. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Okay. As always, I know it's still the exam season for the Virginia people, so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use Tim, Norm, I, or even Jerry. And for the Maryland guys, when that exam comes out, again, feel free to tap us if you need any help. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and end the webinar and ask everyone, Tim, the panelists and we're going to stay on for a little bit, do a post review. But I'd like to ask that everyone else go ahead and sign off. And with that, we'll see you all on Sunday. Have a good night.